Welcome. This is the last panel of the day. My name is Zach Carson, and welcome for those of you tuning in to the Cannabis Sustainability Symposium. This is, as I mentioned, the last one. We have standout social equity programs that states are proposing and implementing, and we have an amazing cast of characters and activists and people who have really helped move the dial in this industry. We have Colin Wells from the Veterans Walk and Talk, Austin Stephenson from Vertosa, Jessica Gonzalez from Minorities for Business for Medical Marijuana, Natalie Papillon from the Last Prisoner Project, and I believe we're still waiting on Margot Bruno from Perpetual Harvest Sustainable Solutions. Why don't we just start off? Maybe everyone just in that order, do a introduction to themselves, and then we'll get started. Love to hear who you are and what work you're doing right now in the industry.
Well, yeah,
maybe starting with Colin. There you go.
Yes, sir. My name is Colin Wells, and I'm a hat model. And I am the U.S. Army infantry veteran. I'm the founder of a cannabis, nature, and psychedelic peer-assisted therapy group called Veterans Walk and Talk, which is on Sunday, this Sunday, actually, we're launching as a national organization. We've been based out of Southern California for the better part of 5 years now. We give out free cannabis and other medicine modalities. You mentioned Lion's Mane earlier, Lion's Mane, one of them, among others. And we give those out free to veterans now under State Bill 34 through licensed dispensaries out here in California. If you come hike with us and you're a veteran, you come get some free medicine. I myself have been afforded the opportunities to work with some of, in my opinion, the most amazing people in cannabis, traveled all over the country giving out cannabis medicine to disenfranchised and marginalized communities, veterans just being one of them, and have been able to see firsthand what growers, distributors, business people in this space have had to endure in order to make this something of a viable option for them business-wise and compassion-wise. And I'm very humbled to be on this panel with such fierce pioneers in this space. And I really look forward to providing some anecdotal stories and also some support to the amazing panelists that I'm sharing the stage with. Thank you.
Nice. Thank you, Colin. Welcome. Appreciate the work you're doing, and let's keep going on with Austin.
Cool. Thanks, Zach. And amazing work you're doing, Colin. Echoing those sentiments, and completely honored to be a part of this panel. Hi, everybody. My name is Austin Stephenson. I'm the Chief Innovation Officer here at Vertosa, which is a cannabis and hemp infusion technology company. We're located here in Oakland, California. And we really specialize in taking cannabis and hemp oils and turning them into fast-acting ingredients for all types of beverages and other infused edibles like fast-acting gummies, PBRs, infused seltzer, Lagunitas hi-fi hops, and the likes thereof. I'm a products guy, by training. I've been in the cannabis space, building businesses for the past 6 years. Really, first, got engaged with the cannabis sustainability symposium during my work at Eurofin Scientific, where I led the business unit got a little bit of an echo. There we go. Where I led a business unit in analytical chemistry and really validating and qualifying all types of infused products. But in relation to this conversation that we're having today, on equity specifically, I serve on Oakland's Cannabis Regulatory Commission. So I, as a public service, and also volunteer as a part of EASE's Momentum program, which provides grants to Black and Brown communities here in the California and across the country to be able to support equity and really launch and build a sustainable framework for organizations and groups that have been marginalized as a result of the war on drugs. So super excited to be here, honored by this conversation, and thank you everyone for the work that they're doing.
Awesome, Austin. Thank you. Proud to have you representing Vertosa. We love you all as partners and the work you're doing as well. Jessica, little introduction from you would be lovely.
Awesome. So hello, everybody. Honored to be here amongst all of you. So my name is Jess Gonzalez. I am a cannabis and intellectual property attorney. So I co-manage the cannabis practice group at my law firm, Bressler, Amory & Ross. That's based in New Jersey. I'm also outside general counsel for Minorities for Medical Marijuana. I sit on the policy committee for the Minority Cannabis Business Association. I am also the CLE co-chair for social equity for the International Cannabis Bar Association. I led the social impact committee for NJCAN, which was the coalition to push forward legalization in New Jersey. So I was integral in that. And I also was very much involved in the drafting of New Jersey legislation as it pertained to social equity as well. So that's just a bit of the number of hats that I wear in this space, but I've advised on social equity in both New Jersey, New York, Pennsylvania, Virginia, Rhode Island, and Massachusetts.
Awesome. Pleasure to have you here, Jessica. Nice to see your face over from the INCBA as well. Quite a crew we have here. And I think lastly, I saw Margot, but I don't think she's back yet. But Natalie, maybe a little introduction from you, and then we'll get into it.
Hi, I'm Natalie Papillon. I'm the Director of Strategic Initiatives at the Lost Prisoner Project. And so I think in this conversation, I will be sort of like the resident criminal legal system person, though I know we have some attorneys on. At the Lost Prisoner Project, I really manage all of our policy initiatives. So thinking through ways in which cannabis policy and specifically cannabis policy reform touches everything from policing to courts to incarceration, and then of course, successful reentry for folks looking to get into the regulated cannabis industry, or just for folks looking to sort of re-enter society and prosper and flourish there. Really excited to be on and to talk about this critically important issue, and then also to engage with the audience. I think all of us here are policy wonks or policy wonk adjacent, and so there's a real opportunity to make sure that as we're advocating for change, we're making sure that's enshrined in the law in order to manifest this industry that really serves everyone, specifically marginalized or disproportionately impacted communities.
Well, thank you, Natalie. Awesome to have you here. We're big fans of the Last Prisoner Project and the work you're all doing. So really, really a pleasure to have you. And lastly, we got you online now, Margot from Perpetual Harvest Sustainable Solutions. Welcome. Nice to see your face. We're just doing some introductions.
Welcome. Thank you so much. I am a board member for the Minority Cannabis Business Association and also a compliance and corporate social responsibility consultant for Perpetual Harvest. As Natalie mentioned, very much into the policy space, former lobbyist for the Michigan Cannabis Industry Association, and a number of policies throughout Michigan and abroad as well in the cannabis space.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, I don't even know where to start. We have some amazing people with some really important experience here doing work that's really shifting and building our industry in a just and sort of sustainable way. Maybe Margot, maybe you can start and tell us a little bit about what's happening in your home state. This panel is really focused obviously on the social equity programs, but I think for our audience, it's really interesting to hear what states are implementing and proposing and how those are being viewed, and potentially we can reveal some best practices that are coming off across the country.
Well, I want to define a little bit about Michigan's social equity program to start as a floor, because I think social equity means something a little bit different to everyone based on interpretation, but specifically as it relates to the interpretation of the law, Michigan is a little bit different in that Michigan is a non-affirmative action state. So the premise of our social equity program is not heavily rooted in diversity and inclusion. It's rooted in poverty level and some other factors as well. And so there's 181 cities in the state of Michigan that qualify as social equity. The largest city in the state of Michigan is Detroit, which is a majority city. And right now, the city of Detroit issued an ordinance in October, November of last year. And that ordinance is now being challenged in federal court based on the Commerce Clause. So I think social equity programs as intended always are supposed to be impactful. I think that impact is impaired a lot of times by the litigation that goes on around social equity. It forces potential owner operators to incur additional holding costs, and just the uncertainty of, is this going to be allowed? If so, when? And an investment space when you're talking about raising capital and being able to, communicate to your investors when they're going to start to see a payout. So Michigan, there are some wins in that it covers a number of licenses. It does provide a minor discount, a 25% discount on the floor for your initial application. That can be higher depending on other criteria like arrest rates potentially, and having been a caregiver in the state of Michigan. So we are 2 years into our social equity program. And to date, there has not been a large number of people that became licensed through this program, either because the cities hadn't issued an ordinance that allowed it, or there's potential litigation that is hindering the program. So we haven't seen a lot of licensees come out of the policy that was created.
Awesome. Thank you for that overview. And, as we go through this, if people want to just add on to anything someone's saying, you don't necessarily need to wait for me to call on you. I like the rolling conversation format, but just to let you know that, and let's kind of going backwards along, Natalie, maybe tell us a little bit more about what Last Prisoner Project is up to, and give us a little insight there and how you see that across, California and beyond.
Yeah, so the Last Prisoner Project, like I mentioned sort of in my intro, focuses on issues that sort of intersect, that span the gamut of policing, courts, incarceration, which is not necessarily what many folks consider social equity, and perhaps rightly so. One thing where I think there's a lot of intersection with these conversations is ensuring that, broad adult use legalization or related reforms are ensuring opportunities for those who have been arrested and are incarcerated because of prior marijuana law violations. I think that's one thing that is, of course, part and parcel a lot of this effort, but sometimes the barriers that face people who are returning to the communities from incarceration, recently or even years past, are really hard to articulate unless you're speaking to constituents directly. So one thing we like to do is, as we advocate for the release of our constituents, and we're successful and want to continue to be successful in doing that, that we're able to empower them to seek employment. So we have, people who are focused on making sure that all of the regulations and sort of the licensing processes account for this, deserving community. But we need to make sure that some of the basic necessities that are too often denied to people who are returning from incarceration are met, so they can take advantage of those opportunities. So whether it's financial assistance for things like housing or transportation or medical bills, which is, a huge issue for people who are formerly incarcerated, but also thinking through things like, basic professional skills, let alone cannabis industry specific skill sets. And the Last Prisoner Project, we're not a reentry provider, but we are a reentry resource in that way, by making sure people are at the level that they need to sort of sustain their lives, so they can use, skill sets that they developed in the past to access those really valuable opportunities in state regulated marketplaces.
Thank you. I'm going to take it over. Sorry, thank you. I'm going to take it over from Zach now. And so I'm going to go in the order that I can see you guys, and I'm going to start with Jessica. This is the Cannabis Sustainability Symposium. What does a sustainable cannabis program look like to you?
Sure. So I'm going to speak from the social equity side of things to see how we can actually make sure that the social equity programs that we are advocating for are actually viable. Because I think, as most of us can probably agree, that there's always a tremendous disconnect between the legislators who are writing statutory law, the regulators who are coming up with the regulations and have to operate within those parameters. Then you also have the business aspect of it. You have the patients, and of course, you have the social equity applicants. And so it's important, I think, to understand the dynamic between all of those groups, because what we really end up seeing is that disconnect really harms social equity programs, because there's a lot of this really pretty language in statutes that then are not actually translated in real life, or the implementation of it is borderline disastrous, or if there's no timelines attached to these programs, then there's no actual motivation to get them done in a timely fashion, right? So when I'm really advocating both, in the state that I live in, New Jersey, but also in the states where I'm advising, is the first thing I want to make sure of is there an actual social equity program? Is there an actual definition for it? The reason why that's important is because here in New Jersey, we don't have one. We actually didn't define a social equity program. What we did was they called it people from socially and economically disadvantaged communities. And it wasn't defined. And I know, as lawyers, that when things are not defined, that level of discretion can be pretty dangerous, right? And so that's one thing, that I would really be looking for. As statutorily, I also wanted to make sure that there's always an allocation of tax revenue that's earmarked specifically for these programs. It is much easier to change regulations than it is to change statutory law. So if we have it in the statute that this must occur, then the commissions or whatever regulatory bodies are created can actually implement that, but at least they're bound to something, which is why I think there's certain things that should be in statutory law, and there's things that fit better on the regulatory scheme. And I think that's a conversation that is really important to have, because you need to understand where you need flexibility, but where you need things to be completely set in stone. And I think the social equity program, I think also the tax revenue as well. But I think the other part is making sure that states are establishing an office under those regulatory bodies that are specifically dedicated towards social equity efforts, but not just establishing that office, but establishing reporting requirements, auditing requirements, because I think what happens is they put a lot of onerous on the applicants themselves. And we all know that having a license is not a guarantee of success. And so what we should be doing is putting the onerous on the states, on the regulatory bodies, to say, you have to show us the success of what you have created, as opposed to, hey, we put this in the statute, we have these programs, you guys failed, that's not on us, that's on you guys, and they can wash their hands clean of that. But when you have auditing requirements, when you have these reporting requirements, I want to know where the money's going to. I want to know what programs happened. I want to know who's getting licenses, who's not getting licensed. I want to see what's going on with folks who were previously incarcerated. So I think for me, when I look at, something that is sustainable, something that is actually going to withstand the test of time, is you're going to need, especially at the inception, things that are set in stone, reporting requirements, and oversight, tremendous oversight over what's happening. Because what we end up seeing in other states is if we don't have timelines, we don't have oversight, we don't have reporting, they hide the ball. And when they hide the ball, it's very hard to then advocate for something when you don't even have the information at hand. But if we put this and we advocate for this, we then have information that we can leverage and use. Oh, you're muted, Margot.
Sorry, thank you so much. Austin, you have one of the best programs I feel that I've seen that actually has become tangible in the city of Oakland. What does a sustainable program look like to you?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that that compliment, Margot. It's a labor of love to really get a social equity program that is sustainable, and really what that means to me, it's one that not only provides access, but also provides a transformative opportunity for individuals that participate in the program, for the business community that is supporting the program, and the overall marketplace as the cannabis industry to be able to live and walk on its own. We're at a very, very interesting place in the evolution of cannabis here and now. For over a entire century, this plant has been stigmatized and it has been associated with the war on drugs and has literally divided communities across the U.S. Now it's being regulated, and there are a lot of opportunists coming into this space, and a lot of that opportunity is fueled by capital, and so it therefore becomes the responsibility, like Jess was mentioning, of the states and local governments to create access and capital for those that have been disenfranchised and marginalized. Here in Oakland, we have done a solid job at creating opportunities and always continuing to want to improve and do better. I don't think the work is over yet. It's just the starting point. And so one thing that has been done, actually kind of compounding on what Jess is talking about in terms of oversight, reporting, and accountability, is that when the equity program was developed here in Oakland, it also came with developing a regulatory commission, one that is from the people and the operators. So in Oakland here, we set up the Cannabis Regulatory Commission, which I volunteer and serve. What this means is that this is a group of taxpaying citizens, locals, that are both operators and constituents, that meet with the city administrator's office to hold them accountable to that reporting, so that we have full visibility on what the how the program is being impacted and the change that it's creating. Here in Oakland, when we started that commission, actually started as Measure Z, which is all focused on reducing the number of cannabis arrests here locally. So what that looked like is that every single month, the police department would come and give us a report on how many cannabis arrests there were and what they were for. And we got that to zero, and it took a few years. But now they're coming in like, we're not making any cannabis arrests. This hasn't happened, and that's what success looks like. So that was stage one. Now though, the bigger part and what sustainability really looks like to me, it's access to capital and building a sustainable business. The reality is that as an operator in this space for the past 5 to 6 years, it's hard to start a business, plain and simple. And to be quite honest, it's a bunch of startups working in a startup industry, because the industry is a startup. We want regulation, we want oversight, we want dashboards, we want all these things, but it takes time and effort and work to get there. And access to capital for communities of color is challenging. You don't have a bunch of wealthy friends and network traditionally, and we do need the support of programs, both public and private, to provide grant money, to provide interest-free loans. And that's something that Oakland has done a really great job at doing. The Elevate Impact program specifically, zero interest loans with a 4-year payback period for equity applicants. And actually, because of the understanding the city has, I just extended that 4-year payback to 6 years to give people more time to be able to pay back those loans. But guess what, y'all? It's hard because the city allocated, it was about $3 million, for that capital, that zero interest loan capital to be deployed. But for it to be sustainable, the loans have to be paid back, or it runs out. And that becomes kind of a little bit of a catch-22, because it's hard to sustain when you have a startup business that is first time operating and needs that training and development and access to building more business so that they can pay back those loans on time. And then it also requires continuous, recurring funding from the state to be able to continue to support this. So, we're at a very fragile moment right now where we can come up with programs that provide access to capital, but we got to keep replenishing it. And we've got to keep demanding that our tax dollars are coming back to these programs, because in many states like California that are cash strapped, allocation of resources is limited. But we have to keep speaking up the community itself, the operators, to say we need to fund these programs, and here's how we're going to fund it, and actually demanding more private support to help fund some of these public initiatives, because at the public level we have such a divergence of interest in terms of public money, where we can help bolster some of this access to capital with the private operators that are doing well and setting up grant programs to help subsidize some of those interest-free loan programs that are out there. So I know that's not the most succinct answer, and that we're kind of in this state of still influx and chaos. But to Jess's point, having that oversight, having that reporting, having that accountability is critical. And then to take it one step further, it's creating access to capital, both in the interest of tax-free loans as well as grant programs, because that's really going to give us the best chance. And when I say us, I mean communities of color, those that have been disenfranchised, the best chance to operate and create a business that's creating jobs and creating other opportunities for folks to build here in the cannabis industry. Oh, you're still on mute, Marga.
Thank you so much. I'm going to go to Colin next. Colin, what does a sustainable program look like to you?
Yes, thank you so much, Margot, and thank you for moderating. And I want to just give the little disclaimer that I am in no way an attorney or versed in any of the areas that my amazing panelists are. I can speak more from a personal level, having seeing my my community that I try to help being affected so deeply. And the way that I've seen that be done is, what I do is give out free cannabis. That's my goal in life. That's what I have made my mark doing. I give out free medicine to veterans and really anyone who ever comes and joins our group. And throughout the 5 years of doing so, I have seen the regulatory and compliance and equity of cannabis shapeshift itself to meet the needs of corporate, capitalistic, and most of the time white America. And to that point, I will say that not only has it become more difficult to give out free cannabis, but it has also become more of a prop for the corporations to say, look at me, look how equitable I am. I give out free cannabis while I charge $100 an eighth in the dispensary, and really give back nothing to the community in equitable ways or in social justice ways. Or I've gone to so many of these dispensary owners, these cannabis corporation owners, and I said, which with Last Prisoner Project and Reform and Weldon Angelos, to their credit, have taken up that mantle and done such an amazing job with it, of putting incarcerated people on their labels, making a bigger stink of this. Like, this is the equity in cannabis, to me, is a difficult topic coming from the places of privilege that I do come from. So I just want to put that out there, that I'm speaking from learning from my brothers and sisters. And that being said, I feel like equity in this country in any form is hard to come by, but cannabis has a unique ability and a unique position to pave that road in the proper way. So what I want to see personally from cannabis equity is no more holding over the flames over these tests that have to be given for their products. Cannabis has to be in a certain zoned area. All these things that are just tying the hands of people. And what it ends up doing in that I've seen is in Los Angeles in particular, social equity contracts are given to people who deserve the social equity contract. They in turn are unable to raise the capital or the means to bring their dream to fruition through that contract. So they have to go and end up selling parts of what they've been given to corporations. And that in turn makes this cyclical beast of what is it really at the core of all of this? It's making money, it's capitalistic endeavor, it's not compassion, and it's certainly not helping the disenfranchised and marginalized communities that have been affected so deeply by cannabis's stature in this country. That being said as well, for the veteran community, which is the one that I can speak of very clearly, equity within cannabis for veterans looks like federal decriminalization and reformation, because people like myself who would like to break into a cannabis, a national presence in that, oftentimes have their hands tied because of federal pensions or federal disability or things that we're getting medical care for that are provided by the VA. So in my own field, we veterans have a unique ability to cross both party lines. So that's what we do on our end. We go and advocate for State Bill 34 in Sacramento. I've been to the Senate in Washington, D.C. to speak at appropriations committees and trying to get cannabis studied in various ways. I'm very grateful to hear all the thoughts and opinions from this panel, because I myself want to throw the veteran community into social equity in ways that I feel like we can help by crossing both party lines. And so, I offer that service to everybody here in any way we can have. And then my good friend, Joanne Balbuena, who is a Navy veteran and owns cannabis businesses and owns clothing businesses. She would be remiss and she would be mad at me if I didn't say that removing unaffordable price tags to enter the space is something that we need to work on, and also requiring real estate to be secured before submitting applications, which I think here in San Diego is something that we are definitely working our way towards. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. That you touched on a lot of great points, and that is very true. The premise of social equity in many places is that you have lived in a disproportionately impacted area, and then at the same time saying, I want you to have access to capital and understand corporate VC and be able to navigate ownership without relinquishing any to these corporate sharks that are in this particular space. So thank you very much. Natalie, what does sustainability look like to you? I am in the home state of Michigan. Recently, Michael Thompson was freed, and he came home to a great deal of fanfare. However, he spent many, many decades behind bars for something that has been legal in some form or fashion since 2008 in the state of Michigan. So what does sustainability look like to you?
Thank you, Mario, for highlighting Michael Thompson's case. I was actually at the prison when he was released. He's one of our clients, and it was such a heartwarming moment, but at the same time, it was still devastating. This man at 70 years old, had spent 25 years of his life for sort of selling 3 pounds of weed to an undercover informant. And it took all of this really amazing, but, time intensive, resource intensive advocacy just to sort of get his release, which, any person, regardless of how you feel about cannabis use, I think any reasonable person would have said it was an egregious and outrageous sentence. And I think that's what I'll, use as a framing for this answer. I think sustainability, and once again, I tend to go to policy, especially when we're thinking about repairing the harms, especially when we're thinking about repairing the harms directly inflicted upon communities because of the criminal legal system, really means that the onus of relief, especially retroactive relief for people with prior marijuana law violations, should not continue to be borne by people who've already been victimized by these unjust laws. So when we're thinking about things that are part and parcel of a lot of these newer reforms happening on the state level, expungement, resentencing, whatnot, obviously very supportive, and that's what a lot of my work focuses on. But when I hear the word sustainability, it's not sustainable to say, we're going to allow people to be eligible for some of these, relief mechanisms, but they have to sort of secure an attorney. They have to take off of work to go petition the court. They have to go, spend hundreds or not thousands of dollars and be subject to a lot of, judicial discretion when it's not necessarily warranted. That's not a sustainable program. That is a press release. That's not something that's actually making a direct impact on communities. And that's, and once again, I'm also not an attorney, so Jess, don't if I get this idiom wrong, please don't get too upset. But that's maybe the letter of the law, but that's definitely not the spirit of the law. That's not the spirit of what legislators have promised and what the public expects. So when we're thinking about anything as relates to social justice in the cannabis industry or beyond, we need to make sure that we're focusing on if these efforts will be sustainable in the lives of the people they're hoping to really impact. And right now, what we've seen is sometimes we'll pass a law and it'll sound great, and then when you get to actually what's the lived reality on the ground, it just nothing is actually changed. And sustainability is sustainable, prolonged, impactful, efficient change, and efficient reforms. And that's what I think is really important for us, especially people who work on policy and advocacy, to always sort of hold up front as sort of the best case scenario and the situation we should all be aiming and working towards.
Thank you so much. Jessica, I want to circle back to something that Austin said that was a key point to me. He said that the reason that Oakland's program was a success was because it was a labor of love. And I definitely think that is part of the secret sauce. That's part of the recipe for a program being great. The fact that it's really heart-centered. In social equity, even though it's legislative, it's a number of things, it is a heart-centered policy. And quite frankly, everybody doesn't agree with it. Everyone doesn't want to participate in social equity. Everyone doesn't even understand social equity. And so you have a situation where owner-operators are being asked to give concessions to people who have previous convictions, who live in these disproportionately impacted areas where they want to live. And it gets really sticky in that realm. So how do we create a sustainable program from that perspective? The fact that everyone just doesn't want to do it.
Yeah, so I think I've definitely been faced, with that reality, or, there's folks who say, well, how can we do this? Or they, pretend that they don't understand it, or that it's, it's too hard, or there's not enough money for it, right? There's all these different excuses, that I've heard, and I'm sure everybody else has heard. But the one thing that I've always harped on is we have to go all the way back, right, to the 1930s. We have to keep folks apprised of the history of it, because I know, and I've seen comments that say, why does everything in cannabis always have to be about race? And it's because this is a civil rights issue. That's why, because when the laws were first enacted, right, and as lawyers, we always look, right, what's the intent of the law? And I know we've always heard, right, what was the intent of the Constitution when all these white men got together? So what was the intent really, right, when you first put forth the Controlled Substance Act? There are facts, there are documentation, there are recordings, there are press, all saying that the Controlled Substance Act, basically making cannabis illegal on a federal level, was not stemmed in public safety. It had nothing to do really with science, but everything to do with disrupting communities of color and the hippie movement at that time, right? So when we think about the law that the Controlled Substance Act, and then we think about all the laws that have stemmed from it, right? Even up to present day, right? If we look at what happened during the Reagan administration, if we look at, Clinton's 3 strikes rule, if we look at all these other laws that have come out, even the criminalization statutes on the state level, all of that stems from the Controlled Substance Act. So if we're looking at all these laws that now we have to go back and basically, remediate all of the effects that it caused, it's because the law created all of this in the first place. And so that's the type of conversation that I have with folks when they try to say, we're always making it about race and, this and that. But that's because that law was based, on wanting to disrupt Black and brown communities. So how can we not have that conversation centered around race? It would be impossible. So in terms of, advocating for, a sustainable cannabis industry that encompasses social equity, I look at it in 2 ways. And I know that you can ask, all of us on here are going to have different definitions of social equity, right? But mine is about twofold, right? So for me, social equity is establishing a statutory and regulatory framework that is centered on repairing and uplifting communities that were harmed by the criminalization of cannabis due to the state's active participation in it, but also creating resources and meaningful, and huge emphasis on meaningful opportunities for folks that do want to get involved in the cannabis industry to have a chance to do so. And so I think a lot of times when we talk about this, they'll say, oh, well, we'll just give licenses here and there. But there are people who really shouldered the burden of the criminalization of cannabis who don't want to get into cannabis, right? They don't want to get into this industry. They already have their life set up, but that doesn't mean that they shouldn't benefit also from this when they've in fact really been impacted, for generations. So we're looking at this in, in twofold, right? We're looking at the folks that don't want to get involved and the folks that do want to get involved, right? And how do we address both, right? And both of them really fall under the community reinvestment, right? You can use the money from either fees or taxes that are coming in order to create better infrastructure in municipalities that have high incarceration rates or have high, disparity rates in terms of cannabis arrests. And I think that that's a type of conversation that I sort of approach it with, is we need to look at it through 2 different lenses, but they fall under the same umbrella. And I think that that's, it's led to a lot of success because I know that a lot of people don't know the history of cannabis prohibition and how it really came to be. But when you let them know that, hey, prior to the 1930s, cannabis was in the top 3, medicines in everybody's medical cabinet. It was in, the 1800s, it was in the US pharmacopoeia. It was removed in 1942 because of all these arbitrary laws that pharmacists and doctors really were burdened by. And that had a snowball effect on it. But folks don't know that. So I have to let them know that this was here. This was a medicinal product. It was recognized as medicinal. The fact that it was in our pharmacopoeia, it was removed. And then all of these laws backed by racist intent were put in place. So here we are having the conversation of how we're undoing all of that.
Yes, I agree. And you touched on history. And I think that is part of the secret sauce that Oakland has, Austin. I think that the history of Oakland as a city greatly impacts the people and the policies that have arisen from Oakland. So looking out at all the other cities and states that are enacting social equity, what is it that you think that we don't see, or what do you think that is impactful to know when it comes to having a program where everyone is allowed to participate in a fair manner?
Yeah, Margo, that's a great question. Let's see if I can kind of unpack some of that. In terms of the history and the culture here in Oakland, I think that is something that's special, that it is very, challenging to replicate. This is the town. You see the
Yes.
Warriors, wear it on their jerseys proudly. When you look back and you think about this more simplistically and at the same time holistically, is that we know here in California that cultivation of cannabis has been going on for generations, and at some degree. And here in California specifically, recreational medical use or access to patient care has been going on for a few decades. And as we think about kind of how cannabis moves, regardless the regulatory framework, just forget all that. At the end of the day, cannabis has been moving to and from California for decades, and Oakland has been that trading post. If you think about this as like a trade capital, Oakland has been that trading post. There's a word, a kind of a phrase here in Oakland that you talk about all the time is called town business. This is town business. That means that's cannabis business. It's been happening. This isn't a new industry. This is just now a regulated industry. And so it's that ownership mentality that Oakland has that says we're taking ownership of the cannabis industry. It has always been town business, and now we're regulating it, and we need to create a regulatory framework that does repair, as Jess was saying, as well as provide those resources to folks that have been marginalized or disenfranchised by the war on drugs and cannabis as a whole. The fact of the matter is, Jess is absolutely right. These state governments have participated in controlling cannabis and incarcerating. So now it's their responsibility to participate in that eradication and that transformation. So one thing that I think is a key takeaway that's really critical, it's okay. You can provide, some regulatory framework. You can provide access to capital. But the key piece is that training. It's workforce development. So when we talk about, elements of community reinvestment, it's that old adage, idiom that, give a man a fish, he eats for a day. Teach a man to fish, he eats for his lifetime. That's what workforce development is for, and that's what Oakland is really, really embracing, I think, and really trying to be that beacon. Is not only providing, those loans and access to capital, but then specifically earmarking funds for workforce development so that we can train people to become cannabis professionals. The reality is here in Oakland, people have been participating in town business for years. Now, how do you make that sustainable? How do you take someone that has been, cultivating or moving product for many, many years in an unregulated market into the regulated market? They've got a ton of sales experience, may have a ton of cultivation experience, but how do you provide a little bit of polish around that so that they can prepare them for a more regulated world? Well, that's workforce development. And so that's investing in training programs, in programs that are going to provide the tools that are necessary to continue, doing what you do best in cannabis, but also translate that well into a more regulated, structured business environment. So that, hey, maybe you have been cultivating up in Humboldt for the past 20 years, and you've been, have product and have a delivery service here in Oakland. Okay, well, how do you set that delivery service up to be the Uber of weed? Well, it takes a little bit of professional polish to get there. And so workforce development programs can help take that framework, help them create the tools that are necessary to go pitch to VCs and private capital and get them ready to take this delivery service and turn it into a potential franchise that they could take from Oakland to Missouri to Illinois to the East Coast or anywhere else in the world. But I think it's that key piece that needs to be talked about more is specifically allocating funds for workforce development and giving people the training that's necessary to put that polish, in this regulated market, because there's so many great skills that are already existed for people. Again, I'll go back to it, that have been participating in that town business, but now we just got to take those skills and refine them to prepare for this whole next wave of regulated cannabis.
And if I could just say one thing, because I do have an anecdote about Oakland that actually really helped me Jersey, because right before, when I was advocating do my thing, I really wanted to talk about folks who participated in social equity programs, because I wanted to know the tea. I want to know what went wrong and what is going to, because we're like 8 years behind the West Coast. So whatever was going to happen over there eventually is going to happen over here. And one of the things was for the technical assistance, that at first it wasn't being taught by folks who actually knew what they were talking about in cannabis. Right. And so when we are talking about access to professional services and also technical assistance, is also making sure that the folks who are teaching these programs, these vendors, are vetted and making sure that they also have the know-how of the cannabis industry, because as we know, it's so nuanced in many ways. But that was one anecdote that I made sure to take with me in my advocacy to make sure that if when we do start offering those programs, that it's not just, oh, willy-nilly, somebody who, never been in cannabis, but, they may know something, because I do think that they have to be knowledgeable of the cannabis industry in order to really translate the education so that it's actually applicable. So I just wanted to put that out there. So shout out to Oakland.
Yes, I totally agree. I think that sometimes the cart gets put before the horse. They say, oh, we passed this law and we're going to grant access to this licensure, but you haven't given anyone any workforce development. So without any experience in the cannabis industry, I'm supposed to just go on a capital raise and procure real estate and, get an architect and do a build out when I haven't even decided, like, is this really the thing for me? Because I have not been an owner operator in this space. So I think that definitely is a key component. Colin, one thing that you mentioned about veterans, veterans have in service of this country have, acquired a number of qualified conditions, and oftentimes to either even use cannabis as a medicine or let alone participate, they have to sometimes divorce themselves from medical care, which is absolutely essential. So what bridges are necessary to make the program more sustainable for veterans to participate?
Yes, thank you so much for that thoughtful question. For me, what I've seen is it's going to take more research, data. The VA and the treatment of veterans is very data driven, because that is how funding is given. If you show results in a field, you will get funding, and if you get funding, you can continue the work. But in a lot of ways, the corporate side of cannabis has gotten in the way of the medicinal side for veterans. It's getting more and more difficult for for veterans to say these things are helping them when it's being sold as a recreation, but we're out there saying, no, it's medicinal. So there's this crossroads of recreational and medicinal use, where if you ask me, I don't see a difference. I think things that are recreational are medicinal. You go play baseball or basketball, you're having a good time. It's also good for you. And cannabis is no different. You can have an intake of cannabis, feel really good, have a good time, and it's also very good for you. So I would say data-driven research will help our community a lot. But to just sitting here listening to the amazing thoughts from all of you is, and especially in the veteran community, my good friend from Operation Evac put it so well, like the best way to help veterans is to stop creating more veterans. And so we need to put a cog in the wheel of the military industrial complex, stop preying upon the poverty lines of this country in order to go and send people off to serve in ways that will inevitably traumatize them and send them back into the communities, shells of the people they left as. And in order to do that, the country, and to the points of the amazing people on this panel about the governance of cannabis and putting the cart before the horse, so to speak, is this acceptance of culpability that we as a country refuse to go through. I work in cannabis and psychedelics and PTSD treatment and pain treatment. That's what I do. And there's no way to cure post-traumatic stress. It's a buzzword to say you cure it. What you do is you go back to the source memory and you accept that it happened to you and brought you to the place you are now, a place of gratitude, a place of light and love. And that way you can no longer be triggered by the source memory, but be empowered by it. And that is the only way to cure cannabis, is one of the greatest footholds in order to do this for veterans and anyone that's been severely traumatized. But until we as a country take our culpability and our responsibility for what it is and what we've done to cannabis and other plant medicines and sacred medicines and indigenous people and people of color and people who have been disenfranchised and marginalized by the war on drugs, until we take full responsibility for that, it's going to be a difficult road for us to get state legislation to put social equity and all these things into place that's truly helping the people that are deeply affected by these things. So, I'm of the mindset if government officials refuse to face the truth of racism and war on drugs and the disenfranchisement of veteran populations, then they need to go and we vote them out and get new ones. So I'm hoping that's going to be the future, and that will help my community and all of our communities get access to what is really a right to be well, which we all have. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. You were really eloquent in expressing those pain points, because there are a lot of intersections between disproportionately impacted communities and also the plight of veterans. And I don't think that those intersections come together often enough in this conversation and in this space. And I think that is a great place for Natalie to come in about, how do we make this more sustainable when it comes to the rights and protections of people who have been previously criminalized by the war on drugs.
Well, yes, I agree, Colin. That was great, and it just shows how this like punitive paradigm that the war on drugs has sort of been rested upon, actually exists in so many facets of American society. And Margot, I think I'm going to sort of take a more like wonky college professor sort of approach to that question. I think there's also, as we can do a lot on the policy side. So I could list off everything, making sure that we're civically enfranchising folks once they've, quote unquote, served their time, making sure that we're no longer denying public access to public benefits like TAMP or SNAP or, access to traditional court proceedings, whatnot. And anyone who's interested in that list, I'm happy to provide it. But I think we also need to step back to make sure we're not perpetuating this cycle by, perhaps another name, is that we need to take it back and think about, philosophically, how we optimize for desirable social outcomes. And I think in this country, especially, but not necessarily limited to the United States, we tend to have this reflexive sort of turning to punishment, penalties, punitiveness to try and address anything that we consider to be a social ill. And I'm a big believer of the fact that people don't do things necessarily because they're afraid of punishment. They do things that are beneficial because they're incentivized to do that. And so we need to make sure that we're looking at the incentive structure for everything from how do we get people to transition into the regulated market? Let's not take a stick. Let's give people and empower people with the tools they need to transition. And if people fumble, make they're well-intentioned, but they make mistakes along the way, let's not recriminalize. Let's actually steer people towards the right path, or the path that, we have come to believe is the path towards the best public health or public safety outcome. And that's, not just for people who might be sort of hawks on the war on drugs. That's even for advocates. Oftentimes I see, we'll see some sort of headline or story, and our reflexive response, even for us well-intentioned folks, is, well, they need to sort of be locked up, or they need to be punished, or, something bad needs to happen to this person. And I think that is just so ingrained in the way we operate, especially as Americans, that we're not actually solving, for the optimal outcome. We're not solving for the public benefit. And I think the war on cannabis, marijuana prohibition more broadly, has been a really sordid example of the ways in which we, don't actually optimize or create policy or create practices that do good, let alone don't do harm, right? And so it's in, the responsibilities on policymakers, it's on regulators, but it's also on us in terms of interrogating how we respond to things that we find to be undesirable or perhaps ill-intentioned.
Yes, I do have hope for the future. I was a founding member of National Expungement Week, and I'm a part-time Cope for America volunteer, and I love Expunge My Record software because you just flip a switch and the record is clear. But in Michigan, we passed a set of what were called clean slate bills, and it called it automatic expungement. But that automatic expungement required you to petition the court and petition the Attorney General. And then, which is not quite automatic. And I was leading a group of SSD people on lobbying for this set of bills. And when they found out that the automatic expungement was not automatic, they were so livid. Like, they couldn't believe that this was being called automatic expungement, and you didn't just wake up and your record was clear. And so I really hope that we elect a new generation of policymakers, because I think that there's a different expectation now for what that criminal reform looks like. And it doesn't look like taking a person, incarcerating them, and then creating a legal market and then asking them to petition the Attorney General. You don't even need to petition the Attorney General to file for a license. Why do I need to petition an Attorney General to, clear an ounce of cannabis off my record? So we are over right now a little bit, but I want to thank you all. You have been absolutely amazing. Is there anything that any of you wanted to say in closing?
Just thank you, Margot, and all of my esteemed panelists. Completely honored to be here, and honored and enthusiastic about all the work that y'all are doing. If anyone ever wants to reach out, or if I can ever be helpful, feel free to connect at any time. Here to help.
Please, thank you so much.
Yes, definitely. And I want to say definitely thank you to everybody, but also just a message to, just folks out there that if you're, in a state that's looking to legalize, state's already legalized, there's a ton of resources out there. And I always tell folks, like, the social equity conversation does not stop at your state borders. It's really, all encompassing. And so all of us definitely have the experience, but I know that I constantly tap on others, for their experience. So I encourage others to do the same. And I'm happy to be a resource for anybody.
Thank you so much.
Yes,
Margot,
likewise. I just want to say, Veterans Walk and Talk, we have a nationwide network of advocates who are, for the most part, veterans. And, if anyone is ever in need of a veteran voice in their local jurisdictions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us, and we'd be happy to facilitate that. As I said, veterans have a unique ability to cross party lines. And so we want to use our voice for change. So, and thank you all. I've learned so much on this panel. Thank you. Thank you, Margot.
Thank you, Colin.
Thank you.
Colin, that's great. Did you say that's called Veterans Walk and Talk?
Yes, veteranswalkandtalk.com or at Veterans Walk and Talk. Yeah.
Margot, thank you so much. And Natalie, Jessica, Austin, Colin, awesome discussion here. I have a little something to add. I did an article for MJ Biz a little while ago about the war on drugs and about how Internal Revenue Code Section 280E is the main tool of the war on drugs. And if you're in the cannabis industry, you know full well what that is, but that is a war on drugs era rule from the US Congress that cannabis companies, anyone who traffics in a controlled substance, can't deduct their costs. That is singly one of the greatest barriers in social equity companies getting to that next step, because it is what takes all the profits out of the company. It is what prevents companies from doing things like training their employees, providing healthcare to their employees, and reinvesting the profits into their community, and really ending the war on drugs through the dollars that are generated through those social equity programs by raising everybody up. And so strong work to do there in getting rid of Section 280E, not just because it's unfair for the cannabis industry, but it's really holding back the social equity programs that are so important in today's society. And so I thank you all so much for this program. I'm going to write another piece for MJ Biz on this very topic, link together the war on drugs and Section 280E and social equity. I think it's a really important part right now, and it is one of the tools that we need to push out of the way so that we can move this all forward. So thank you all so much for your time today. Really super important topics. I'll stop there if anybody wanted to comment on that at all, but I'm really happy to hear what I'm hearing here today.
Thank you so much.
So thank you. My name is Nick Richards. I'm a partner at Green Spoon Martyr. I've been a tax attorney for about 20 years and in the cannabis industry for about 13 years or so. I work with a ton of cannabis companies all over the country. I am super excited and so thankful for the cannabis industry. Took me from being a nerdy tax guy to a cool marijuana guy, right? And so it has, I cannot say how much it has improved my life and my circle of friends as well. So I am just super excited about it. It's huge. You know, I've been working with the Cannabis Certification Council, the council, since the beginning. I'm one of the founding board members. Great group. Thank you so much, Council, for all you do in educating the world really on cannabis and doing away with all of the misinformation that's out there and cutting through that. It's such an important service that the council does, and I am so proud to be part of it. I am basically here to kind of wind up. I'm not sure if I'm the designated hitter or what I am in this arena, but I have a list of extremely important people that have sponsored this event that really deserve the appreciation of everyone. Without our sponsors, we would not be able to do this. So we thank our sponsors so much, and everyone who helps put these programs together and bring them to the forefront. Such a great service for the cannabis community, and we so appreciate everything that is being done to get these messages out. So I'm going to go through this list and I'm just going to name off all these wonderful companies. If you're out there thinking that you might be one of these wonderful companies on the next term around, give our staff a call. We would love to talk to you. There's plenty of room for all the movers and the shakers to come on board and get on to this important movement that we're all part of. So thank you, Boveda, Bonafine's Laboratory, CG, Fortis Consulting, Gannett Fleming, Groden, Hawthorne Gardening Company, Legal Services. Hi, Amy. Marijuana Business Daily. Thank you guys. They're in our corner. Marijuana Industry Group. Thank you so much, Mig. You guys have been a long-term time player here, and we really appreciate you guys. Rasky Partners. Thanks for getting the word out. Santa Packaging. Save the Terps. Please save the Terps. Silver Bullet Water Treatment, we need that. Six Labs, can we have a seventh, please? Smoky Cannabis Company, the Cannabis Marketing Association, let's get the word out, right? Vicente Cedarburg, hey guys, hope you guys are doing well. Series Greenhouse, way to go. Fluence, keep making those great lights, guys. Green for Green, Lit Dispensary, Recreate Cannabis, Row Black, Solar Therapeutics, Stanley Brothers, and STO Responsible Pure Pressure. Thank you all so much for joining us and making this this conference possible. Thank you so much for your sponsorship. Thank you for your guidance on the council as well. We all look to you industry experts for sources of information and for direction on where we're going. Such an important influence that you all have on the process of getting the word out. Cannot emphasize that as much. Thank you, Ben Gelt, for our fearless leader, for the work that you do. I appreciate you and the work you do, and I appreciate your friendship as well. And thank you, everyone who is making this possible today and bringing this together. Another successful program out there. We've got some more coming up that you can find on our website. And I'm supposed to give a shout out for our CSS series event that's in June, wherein we'll be looking at covering events or the topic of packaging. Always an important topic in the cannabis industry. I heard recently they're considering individual 1/10 gram package requirements for dabs, wax and oil and whatnot here in Colorado. So, you know, packaging isn't just as simple as child-proof packaging. There's a lot to it. In the sustainability conference, we want to talk about whether all this packaging is sustainable or not. And so huge topic on the future for us that we can get into like we do on these programs, bring in the experts, find some solutions here, right? Let's get to some place where we can all reduce our packaging, reduce our footprint, create sustainability, and create the greatest industry in the world. Thank you everyone so much for joining us today. Once again, Nick Richards. If anybody wants to reach out to me on the 280E and the social equity program, I'd love to hear from you. Nick.Richards@GM, that's Greenspoon Martyr, gmlaw.com. Nick.Richards@gmlaw.com. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful weekend. Looking to be a good one out there. Appreciate it.